Okay, so we're online with recording. So I'm going to hand over to Chai, who will be our host for the day and who will introduce our panelists. So Chai, you can take over from here.
Thank you, Viviana. Good morning, everyone. So I'll start by presenting myself. My name is Chai Fundanga. I'm a sustainability and communications consultant at Tandem. Tandem is a consulting firm that basically helps companies with their transition towards more responsible practices. Today, I am here with three great panelists, all experts in their respective fields, all also passionate about sustainability and promoting responsible practices within the seed industry and the agribusiness in Africa. So Earnest, I'll let you start by introducing yourself, then we can move on to Wayne and finally Andrew.
Sorry, Chai, can you just press slideshow in your top right to start presenting full screen? Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Welcome to this webinar. My name's Earnest. I'm a CEO and a Croplife, which is an association of chemical companies. Thank you and welcome.
My turn. Good morning, everybody. I see that's a bit of an older photo. You can see I've grown a bit since then, hopefully more experience. So yes, I work with Syngenta. I'm the technology lead for AMS Seedcare and also run the Seedcare Insitute that's based in South Africa.
Thanks, Wayne.
Morning, everybody. So my name is Andrew McNaughton. I'm with Tandem Circular Consulting. I've got a background in waste management, and more recently, we've been working with the chemical and the seed industry across Southern Africa to help support them with solid and liquid waste management.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everyone, for making it to join us this morning. So let me start by framing our conversation for today. Issues like climate change, natural resource depletion, and other environmental matters have made sustainability a key factor in the private sector. The need to be more responsible in the seed industry made us analyze the inputs, processes, and outputs of the seed production. One major output identified in this analysis was the excess empty chemical plastic containers from seed treatment. We decided to address this issue using circular economy, recycling to be specific. However, for this process to be carried out safely and effectively, the containers had to be triple rinsed, and for them to be considered non-hazardous and therefore safe for recycling. This process produced large amounts of wastewater, which is a stage at which we decided to invent the Heliosec, which is basically a wastewater management innovation. So based on that, for today's agenda, we plan on having a panel discussion where we kind of discuss the key elements which I just presented. We'll then move on to present an exciting awarding incentive that might encourage you to join this very interesting recycling initiative. And finally, we'll open up a Q&A for anyone who might have questions. So basically throughout this webinar, if you have any questions, kindly drop them in the Q&A box or the chat box and indicate the panelists who you're addressing, or if there's none specifically, we'll pick the most suitable person to answer. And we'll do that at the end of this. So without wasting any more time, we'll jump straight into the panel discussion. Earnest, kindly guide us in and explain to us why it is important to practice sustainability within the seed industry.
Thanks, Chai, and yet again, welcome to this webinar. My name's Earnest, written there, but I will speak, I think, for the next maybe 8 minutes. But just in case, like Chai said, you've got a question, drop it in the chat. We may look at it if it's a short answer. If it's a long answer, we'll look at it at the end of the webinar, towards the end. So really, what are we talking about when we talk about stewardship, which is my topic? Stewardship, really, I normally love the explanation given by Chapin with his colleagues in 2010, because his explanation of stewardship, and more specifically environmental stewardship, is the aspect of being responsible, really. Responsible when you are using and also to protect the natural environment. conservation and sustainability practices. And I will discuss a little bit about each of these as I go along in my presentation on conservation and also sustainable practices. What we're trying to look at is the ecosystem itself. How are we looking at the ecosystem? How can we sustain the ecosystem? It should be resilient, and it should also have a human face to it. Then when I talk about sustainability, several factors come in. So I'll just run through most of them, which you can see there, which is moral responsibility. It's just moral responsibility for companies like seed companies and any other industry, really, to make sure that they take care of the environment, because it's what gives us the business. That's where we live and we do many other activities. We know of the triple bottom line, for instance, of the people, planet, and the earth. So we need to take care of that. It's our responsibility as companies and, of course, as individuals. Then it's a legal requirement and market requirement as well. If you need to continue trading in this space of seed, and you really need to make sure that the legal framework within your country, you follow it, and the markets as well require that. Above all, like stewardship indicated just the previous slide, you prevent pollution of the environment when you look at the aspect of wastewater management. Business continuity at both the company level and the farming level, very, very critical, so that you make sure that sustainability feeds into the continuity of the business entity itself, of the seed company and the farming community. Farming community is very, very wide. The small scale, medium scale, large commercial farmers, the animal farming, crops farming, aquaculture, all those farming activities to make sure that they continue as is. Then definitely at household, national, and global food security. As we know that we've got a finite earth, it's fixed, but the population keeps increasing, and therefore we need to make sure that we put in measures that are going to give us enough food at household, at national, and at a global level, meaning the entire world, as it were. So really, stewardship is very, very critical to make sure that you as a company, as an individual, you're responsible, you meet the legal requirements and market requirements, don't pollute the environment, then the continuity of the businesses as well as the food security at those various levels. That's what stewardship is all about. You can go to the next slide, which is a bit more specific now to the aspect of the activities that we're looking at with the seed sector. It's often said, and it's very true, that with farming, especially with crops, everything starts with quality, and I'll add certified seed. So quality certified seed is very, very critical. At Zasta, and of course many other collaborating partners, we are very passionate about the campaign against fake seed. We should make sure that we promote good quality and certified seed. Then other aspects can come in, because that gives you the potential yield that you can have at the end of the day. Make sure that the soil healthy is catered for. And when you speak about soil healthy, very many things come to mind. The chemistry part of it, the living things, which is the biological component, and of course the physical properties of the soil. So all these three aspects need to be nurtured and taken care of. Then you're going to have seed in an environment where it can thrive and grow properly. Added to that, of course, is the aspect of clean irrigation water, which could be, of course, rain-fed. If you are using dam water or river water, make sure that that water is clean, because the crop will need to also drink and feed as well from the good nutrition in the soil health aspect. Then the aspect of responsible use of a crop protection product. This is also very, very key and important. And specifically, this is where now we're looking at the wastewater management system. And my colleagues is going to tell you a little bit about how you can clean up the water which has been contaminated, for instance, from pesticides and chemicals or anything that's toxic. So responsible use of CPP. IPM, integrated crop management, comes in there, because you need to make sure that you use the best chemicals for the best solutions that you have with you, and also looking about where you are sourcing the chemical, how you're using the chemical, and if there's any residues that remain thereof, either from the spraying activity or from whatever chemicals that are obsolete that you do not use, you take care of them responsibly. Remember the moral responsibility. Then that feeds into the high yields. And high yields, of course, talks about the profitability and the sustainability of the business. So really stewardship in a nutshell, very, very wide. But in this case, we're trying to narrow it to the seed companies and activities within the farming sector with our seed companies. So if there's any question, please, you can put in the chat. This is very general that I've just given you. My colleagues are going to maybe zero in on the responsible use of CPP. My colleagues are going to zero in on one critical aspect on how to deal with the knapsacks or the spray equipment itself and the residues and what you do with the residues. But of course, high yields is what we're looking for to make sure that at household, at national level and at global level, we've got that food security. Thank you, Chai. I'll hand over. Sure, thanks.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you so much for that presentation. Basically, to summarize, as a company, you have an image that resembles that of a human being. You have a responsibility to be responsible out there. And with that, we're going to present a solution to you that we came up to that required obviously certain actions to be executed properly. So Wayne, if you could kindly guide us into what triple rinsing is all about and this recycling initiative that has been developed here in Zambia in the seed industry.
Perfect. Well, thanks again once for having me. Ernest, I don't know if I'm going to beat your presentation, but I'm going to try. So yes, so triple rinsing. What is triple rinsing and why is it important? So when you use a product and you empty the last bit of the product out, because of the viscosity or the flowability of the product, you don't always get all the product out. So once you think the container is empty, you put it down, some of the product will actually sink down to the bottom again. And that's where triple rinsing comes important, because when you throw the containers away, there's still product inside of it. So how do we do this? So to ensure the container is clean of product inside, we do triple rinsing. What is triple rinsing? Well, the name suggests washing the container at least 3 times. After washing the container 3 times, punch holes into the container. Empty containers should be taken to an approved waste handling site for recycling or disposing. And please, I'll ask you so nicely, do not reuse empty containers. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so sorry, I'm jumping over to my notes because I get so excited I could talk about this for hours. So, but as the next question suggests, what are the challenges? So the biggest question would be, what about the wastewater when you triple rinse? What do we do with that water? So there are a few ways to look at it. Firstly, when you prepare your slurry or your recipe, when you make it in your mixing tank, what you can do is use 90% water of your recipe, and you use that to clean the containers, and then you can put that water back into your recipe. Okay. Triple rinsing the empty container as well. So what else you can do is, once you take it and you empty the container out, take 10% of the water you're actually going to use to make the slurry. And you can use that water to actually triple rinse it. You throw the water back into your slurry, into the mixing container. Also, when you clean your equipment, as long as you don't use other materials in it, you can clean your equipment and use that same water to put back into your slurry. This will reduce the wastewater, but of course, I will let Andrew take over and explain how to dispose now of the wastewater after the triple rinsing. Just 2 important factors. Please do not contaminate ponds, waterways, or beaches with chemicals or used containers. Do not dispose of waste materials into the sewers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you for that, Wayne. So in case we've had anyone who's just joined us, basically Earnest explained what sustainability was all about and why it's important for companies. And Wayne has run us through recycling and why it's important to triple rinse these chemical containers that will be recycled after, and how you can reduce obviously the water that comes out from this triple rinsing. And then finally, obviously, despite the reduction of this water, you still have to a certain amount of water that is unmanaged. So Andrew, what can we do to basically manage that remaining water?
Great, thanks so much, Chai. If you can just move on to the next slide from here, and I'll get into it. So in terms of managing wastewater that has chemical residues in it, Syngenta and a company in France called Solhead have come up with a very simple and cost-effective wastewater management device called a Heliosec. Now, it's important to look quickly at where this came from. Basically, back in the early 2000s, there was a piece of research that identified that about 70 to 80% of all chemical contamination in the environment was coming from farmyards. So quite a concentrated source of chemical contamination. And this was mainly coming from spray or cleaning of spray equipment, rinsing of empty containers and disposing of that water at that level. So they identified that there was need for a solution to deal with wastewater that had chemical residues inside of it. So the Heliosec was born as a solution mainly for larger scale or commercial farmers to deal with their wastewater. However, it's also ideally suited to seed treatment facilities. And we'll talk a little bit more about how it can work in those types of facilities shortly here. So what is a Heliosec? Basically, it's an evaporation tank. So it's placed outside in the sun, and through the action of the sun and the wind, the water evaporates from the chemicals, and you get a chemical residue or chemical sludge remaining in the tank. And the reason we say it's sort of simple and effective is a lot of wastewater treatment solutions focus on filtering out or removing the chemicals from the water, which often requires specialized technology, expensive equipment, and so on. Whereas what this does is it removes the water from the chemical residues using the sun. So again, sort of renewable energy fueling the actions here. A lot of thought has gone into making the system safe and to limiting any potential environmental contamination. So it has a roof to protect it from rain, more water entering in. Obviously, you want to reduce the amount of water. It's placed on a concrete base. So again, if worst case there are any spillages, you can identify those. But the actual tank itself has 3 layers of protection. Firstly, there's a plastic liner that holds the water. Once the water is evaporated, that also makes it very easy to fold up that liner and send it to a hazardous waste disposal facility. And then the actual tank itself has got 2 layers, so essentially built-in bunding for that. Finally, there's a metal screen around there that prevents any wildlife coming in and drinking the water or anything like that. And the Heliosec can be installed in various ways. So, for example, it can be connected to a rinsing bay. It can be connected to a wastewater tank. You can use multiple of them in parallel. One tank can hold about 2,500 liters, but can evaporate more than that in a year. Obviously, that's continuous action. Or it can be connected to a sump and a pump system. So, yeah, Chai, if you can go to the next slide, please. I'll carry on talking about what the benefits of the Heliosec can be. So basically talking about operations like seed treatment facilities, basically the wastewater that could have chemicals in, and any wastewater from triple rinsing empty containers. Wayne very accurately outlined the importance of rinsing these empty containers, but obviously through the use of seed treatment products, there is other wastewater that's produced. So all of these can be put into a Heliosec. And as I mentioned, the tank itself can hold up to 2,500 liters. But in a context like we find ourselves, where there's a lot of sunlight and quite hot conditions, throughout the year, we can evaporate up to 7,500 liters. Important to note that this device has also been approved and is in line with EU standards. And at the end of the day, what this can do is, rather than needing to dispose of all of your wastewater, it can significantly reduce the volume of wastewater through the evaporation up to about 97%, which therefore means that instead of paying for disposal of all of your wastewater, now you're only paying for sort of 3 to 7% of the cost. So again, significant improvements in sort of environmental safety, as well as reducing cost. Thank you, Chai.
Thank you, Andrew. I've heard quite a lot of exciting words from our panelists, so things like wastewater reduction, the reuse of chemical material at the bottom of the chemical containers, in slurries and spray tanks. We heard about Andrew mentioning wildlife and the fact that we're using the sun and the wind, so we're not actually depending on electricity. And also Ernest mentioned yields, so we can kind of see how sustainability has got so many benefits, both for production, both for the environment, and also kind of reduces production costs. So to kind of summarize all of this, we came up with this great initiative this year to encourage more companies to be more sustainable. Obviously today, our focus was presenting a specific solution found for the seed industry, which was the recycling of the plastic chemical containers. But there's so many other ways in which one can be responsible, so many other ways in which you could potentially add sustainable initiatives or ideas within a company. So through this initiative, we're trying to create a platform where we can award people for potentially maybe using the available solution that we have, or even coming forward and sharing knowledge and sharing other ideas that they might have had, or things that they're doing on their side, on their own. And this platform will potentially have rewards and certification, and it'll also be a moment for us to interact and network with other companies. Obviously, this is in the running, and this is an ongoing idea, which we hope to be able to develop this year, ideally with those who are with us today and many other companies that will be able to see this video once it goes online. And this idea is obviously being run by, for the moment, Syngenta Seedcare. But like I said, it's really open to all companies, and we're trying to kind of create a hub of sustainable, I'd say, seed industries in Zambia, and sustainable farmers or sustainable agribusinesses within the country. So as mentioned, we're going to conclude with our discussion today. I don't know if we've got any questions. Bibiana, did you get anything? Just maybe.
Yeah, there's one question on the Q&A chat for Earnest.
Okay. So we've got a question for Earnest. My question goes to Earnest. How often does Zasta engage its members towards tackling environmental issues? Are there any collaborative efforts for Zasta in engaging its members, and specifically to take precaution towards environmental challenges?
Yeah, sure. Great, thanks. And I think it's Boaz who's asked. Thanks, Boaz, for the good question. Yes, from Zasta's point of view, really immediately when you are joining Zasta, we do communicate the aspect of the moral and ethical responsibility of your operations as a company to all members. We do that, and from time to time, we do send notices to ensure that companies include the aspect of environmental responsibility in their operations. Then also one of the major things in the past 2 or 3 years is the aspect of partnerships with various entities and organizations involved in environmental protection and conservation. Starting with ZEMA itself, with its Zambia Environmental Management Agencies. So Zasta encourages and does support companies through provision of information, technical knowledge, and anything, and networking with others. Specific companies like Syngenta, I think they've got a whole lot of stories they can tell. Felix is here, and what they're doing with environmental protection and environmental conservation. Equally, other seed companies are also doing the same, and we're trying to network them so that, because by and large, if you talk about the outgrower scheme that farmers have, if they've got a group of farmers in Mumba area who are growing seed, they are using the same environment, they are drawing from the same river. So that's why we emphasize partnerships between entities, and also collaborations with specific experts like Tandem to come in and assist companies like Syngenta with that technical support. So yes, Zasta is working some of it right at inception. When somebody joins the institution, the association, we encourage them to make sure that they've got environmental policies rather and procedures within them. Then also the aspect of partnerships is very, very key, because they are targeting the same land space in the country to use. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Ernest. We do have another question. Andrew, you did mention that the Heliosec leaves a certain form of residue at the bottom. What happens to that residue? How do you treat it and how do you manage it?
Yeah, thank you for that. So very, very important question, because obviously that residue is what we're trying to avoid getting into the environment. And we've had a few similar debates and discussions in the past where sometimes there's concern that the wind could come and blow the residues away and so on. So the way that we recommend operating that Heliosec is keeping an eye on it and making sure that the sludge that's at the bottom doesn't dry out. Obviously, if it's wet, it all sticks together. And therefore does not get to a point where it is dry. However, most of the products that are usually found in there don't necessarily form a dust, but rather a cake on the bottom of this tank with the Heliosec. From there, obviously, we need a channel to dispose these. Now, for hazardous waste, generally around the world, global best practice is that for such hazardous waste, the best disposal method is to incinerate at high temperatures, so temperatures above 1,000 degrees. And basically what that means is the active ingredients and any other chemicals in that are completely destroyed because it's at such high temperature. Now, in Zambia, in Zimbabwe, and across the world, actually, Syngenta has partnered with Lafarge Geocycle. In Zambia, that same division is now called Eco Unit under Huashin Cement. And basically what they do is they safely input that into their cement kiln. And the cement kiln actually provides an ideal environment for hazardous waste destruction because the temperatures there are even above 1,000 degrees. Cement kilns usually operate at around 1,400 degrees. And obviously partnering with a company such as Lafarge or Huashin, they're a global brand, they're responsible, they're operating in line with global best practice and local regulations. So as I mentioned, for feeding those chemicals into the kiln, they've got a very sophisticated automated robotic system, let's say, to feed that in. So again, it's very safe. And the added benefit of that over traditional incineration is that essentially the ash that comes from this is then mixed with their cement, meaning that it's ultimately embedded in concrete or something like that, which is inert for the foreseeable future. So yeah, that's our disposal method of choice. And again, this has come from many years of research and work to make sure that we find the best, safest, and most environmentally compliant method for disposing of that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Andrew. I guess the obvious next question would be how can one procure a Heliosec? I mean, the idea today is all about wastewater management, and there's this great initiative. How is it possible for one to get a hold of this and potentially put it in their operations?
Great. Yeah, so maybe I can field that. And I see we have Felix on the call, who wasn't necessarily meant to speak today, but my suggestion for that around the Heliosec would be to engage with your local Syngenta or Seedcare representative. And let's get a conversation going and see how we can support you to better manage your wastewater. It's not as simple. It's not necessarily a plug and play solution where you just put it down and it works. There's obviously some service that needs to be built around that. So yes, please feel free to engage with your local Syngenta or Seedcare representative, and we can get the conversation going around that.
Thank you, Andrew. I have maybe one last question, and then maybe if Felix wants to say anything, closing remarks. Wayne, we do have worries from the audience as to whether after triple rinsing, how is it known that the containers are now safe? So people would like to understand this idea behind triple rinsing.
I saw that question and I knew you're going to refer it to me. Good question. That's the reason for triple rinsing, because even with triple rinsing, you can never be 100% sure. That's why you're going to make sure it's done correctly. That's why one of the points I mentioned, punch holes into the container so we can make sure it's not used for drinking water. I've seen it, unfortunately, quite a few times. I've traveled in Africa. It's a bit scary. So there will always be a minute residue. That's why you don't use it. But with triple rinsing, even if you go to a proper landfill where they can dispose of it, the environment is safe. But like Andy also mentioned, incineration, we will take the containers and incinerate it. And of course, we'll use that plastic, incorporate into cement or into products that's non-food usages, for example, that we can use like benches and chairs, that kind of thing we've done in the past and been quite successful with it. The triple rinsing just to make sure that the majority, 99.9% of the chemical is not in the container.
Thank you.
Maybe if I could also just add to that quickly. Very important part of that is understanding that the chemicals are completely removed. And I think it's important to know, and to in line with what Wayne is saying, is that actually the plastic chemical containers do absorb small amounts of the active ingredients in there. So the chemical is never completely removed, which is why the point that Wayne makes is so important, that these containers shouldn't be reused again. And when they are recycled, it should be made into a product that's not going to be used for food or beverages. So again, the products there that Wayne mentioned are sort of deemed safe. So for construction or fence posts, things like that. We have conducted some initial tests. Again, can't release those to the public because we want to do a few more tests just to verify, but we have sent some samples of recycled plastic pellets for analysis at the Seedcare Insitute, which is a world-renowned lab in Greece. And again, levels of the active ingredients were detectable in the plastic, but they were below global limits, which would deem the plastic hazardous anymore. So again, based on the results, that plastic would be deemed non-hazardous, but the point Wayne makes is so essential there that you've got to look at, again, the end product and making sure that that doesn't go back into food or beverages.
Thank you, Andrew and Wayne. And just to add on to this, I think obviously this is a first initiative. The idea at the end would be potentially close the loop. So closing the loop is a situation in which after you turn your waste into something new, you kind of return it back into the cycle. So potentially the best thing would be even for people to reuse this, recycle it, and then reuse these containers to reproduce pesticide materials with the recycled material. And that would cut down on a lot of costs that people are currently dealing with. So based on the time, I don't know if we can take a last question.
There's another question for me in the Q&A.
Yes, there's a question for Earnest. On a scale of 1 to 10, what are the compliance levels of hazardous waste disposed amongst seed companies in Zambia?
Yeah, sure. Among seed companies in Zambia, I must say there's quite a wide range from excellent to poor, I must say. There are companies that are doing a great job, really, internally as companies. Of course, I won't go into the names, but there are companies that are doing a great job in terms of compliance levels, where they are competing with global kind of statistics. But also we've got companies that also are on the not so good scale, where they need to up the compliance levels. The good thing at the national level, we've got ZEMA, which does some compliance monitoring. Of course, they've got their own challenges in terms of capacity, but they are doing what they can to make sure that even the seed companies comply. But on a scale of 1 to 10, I would put it possibly at 5 to 6, somewhere there, because of the good companies that are in the seed industry specifically, that's your question. So within the seed industry, I'd put it at 5 to 6 on average, because there are some companies that are doing a great job in terms of compliance. Yeah.
Thank you, Ernest. And kind of in line with this question that you have, yes, Wayne?
I want to jump in as well, but I'll go afterwards. I see we've got a few minutes still to talk, so I'll jump in afterwards again.
No, please go ahead, Wayne.
Just a quick one that just jumped out of my mind now, and I know we are short for time. A quick one as well. When using, a lot of times when we mix up products, we use a bucket to pour the product in, to either weigh it or to look at it volumetric size. Again, as well, it's the same as what we said about containers. If you use the bucket, triple rinse it and use it water to put into your slurry. Also, that bucket that you use, make sure that it's marked hazardous, or you've got some type of warning on that we know the bucket that they use for the measuring of the products for the slurry or for the mixture, that it does not get used for anything else. So if you are using buckets to measure, just put a big sign on to say hazardous or some warning, just to make sure that somebody doesn't pick up the bucket and go, I'll use this to pour some water in and use it for something else. So also triple rinse that as well. So it just jumped into my head now. So I think that's also
no problem. Thanks for that one, Wayne. Actually, that's a very important point that Wayne has highlighted. Obviously, in this conversation or these discussions, we didn't really talk much about the HSC aspect of things, but that's a key thing in most of our operations and our thoughts when developing these ideas, because currently the health risks that are involved in the agribusiness are so high, and most people don't realize to what level they are. And so that's something that we take very seriously in our solution finding and our implementations. So thank you very much for that, Wayne. Earnest, obviously these conversations we've been having have kind of highlighted a lot of higher scale, I'd say, ideas. Would you have any advice for companies on, I'd say, more rural basis or smaller scale who would want to practice sustainability? Yeah, sure. Quickly. Really, I would encourage possibly looking at the audience that we have. If you've got some kind of workers who interact with small scale farmers, my encouragement is please take the message to them, if I may call it the gospel message, about green living. Just make it as basic as it can. Let them live green, taking care of the environment, waste management. And actually, Andrew knows this very well. Waste is cash because he's been in the space for quite a while. So waste can be cash. So if they can ensure that the small scale farmers, from the waste that you have from the households, from the cattle, chickens, you can make biogas, for instance. So there's several things that we can go and introduce to the small scale farmers instead of making the waste become a menace and a pollutant, but the waste becomes something that they're using on the farm. Compositing, for instance, the household waste. In Malawi, there's somebody who's using urine to make fertilizer. So really, you can look at all these small innovations, even at the small scale, at the farm level, where we can adopt that. But the message to us is let's take this to the small scale farmers, because quite a lot of innovations and technologies are being developed, but they are not trickling down to the small scale farmers in the rural areas. And the audience like what we have here could be drivers towards that, to make sure that rural farmers also benefit. May I also just quickly add something in a minute? One of the partnerships that Zasta has is with Croplife, and where they're implementing a project in Zambia. And the initial one has started in Mkushi, where we're looking at mopping out the containers, chemical containers, which are empty. Of course, after being triple rinsed, they've gone through the process and checked, then to be taken back to recycling into non-food grade products like Andrew indicated. So it's something that Zasta is working with Croplife. The project is sitting with Croplife, but Zasta is heavily involved with Zasta members, who are some of them Croplife members as well. Thank you for that, Ernest. Do we have any extra comments from our panelists? Any extra points that we might have missed out, or things we'd like to share with our viewers? No? I know there is someone we've been seeing here who has not really spoken. Felix, I don't know if you'd like to say anything to the viewers today, or just share with us.
Well, thank you so much, Chai. I think it's just to reemphasize the point given by Andrew over the question of how to access the Heliosec. So we have, as Seedcare Syngenta, we have an initiative through Zasta where we are trying to co-finance this with the seed companies. There are a number of seed companies, some who are in Disco, that have accessed this facility. So we signed some sort of an agreement where we supply this implement to the seed companies. However, we've seen also an increase in the corporates, some corporate firms that want to have to access this technology. So they are free to contact us and then we can discuss. The whole idea is to make operations in agriculture sustainable in the long run. Thank you, Chai.
Thank you very much for that, Felix. I think that's about it. I don't know if we have others. We're almost close to time. There's maybe one last question here. The biggest challenge is getting the buy-in from management on the issue. How would you suggest that can be done? Obviously, legal enforcement is quite poor here in Zambia. I don't know which panelists are best suited to look at that. We could potentially even send that answer out.
I'd be happy to field that, just in terms of some of our experiences in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tunisia, and some other countries that we're working on projects like this with. The sustainability and these kind of environmental initiatives can sometimes be tough because it can require an investment. It can require time. It can require change, and change is always difficult. However, what we're seeing more and more is that investing in such sustainable initiatives has a long-term benefit, both in terms of reputation and in terms of cost savings. I think we presented in our slides here how using the Heliosec can significantly reduce cost of disposal of wastewater, for example. I think it's important to look at all of these factors and to look at the long term. And I think what's been fantastic about this project is that Seedcare and Syngenta are really leading the way, walking the talk, and supporting their customers to do this more sustainably by contributing equipment and technical expertise and so on to developing these types of solutions. So the change is not always easy. But I think the one small step in the right direction is a good way to start, and you'll see the benefits from there. So again, if you want to look more at any of these topics, please do engage with us, and let's discuss in more detail how we can support you in these. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. Perfect way to end this webinar. I think in summary, obviously today we spoke about circular economy, where we're looking at reusing raw materials and using materials into a cycle. So as Andrew's mentioned, it's costly. There's lots of legal factors in this, but it is possible. And it takes understanding the cycle. It takes analyzing your inputs, your processes, and your outputs for solutions to be found. But don't run off the fact that, oh, it might be costly or it's just legally impossible. It is possible. And like we've shown you today, we've done it, and we're hoping to continue growing this in Zambia. So thanks to all the viewers who made time to join us today. And thank you very much to the panelists that really shared very insightful information with all of us. Bibiana, I think I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Chai. Like Chai said, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all our attendees. I will be stopping the recording now.